And we're live. We're all set, Judy.
So this is the September 17th Newburyport Affordable Housing Committee, Housing Trust Committee, City of Newburyport, and we've got Madeline Nash, myself, Judy Timon, Madeline Nash, Suzanne Cameron, and staff Kate Sullivan and Andy Port. So the first item on our agenda was Tiffany. I guess Tiffany has not called in yet.
No, Judy, looks like she's there, and so is Karen. Also, we can probably move Karen over to the panelist list too.
Yeah.
Oh, Karen Weiner is here as well. So did you say Tiffany was there?
Yeah, I've just promoted them to panelists, so they should be able to unmute and speak along with everyone else.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Karen.
Hi.
So is everybody all set? Is everybody comfortable with their connection?
Yep.
So, Madeline, I like the birds on your wall.
This is my daughter's bedroom, which I have maintained unchanged for the last 8 years. So you could analyze that if you want to, but.
We'll ask you 20 years from now.
Judy, are you gonna run the agenda?
Well, yeah, I thought we were going to get Tiffany on.
Oh, I'm here. Can you not
Oh,
see me?
you are. Oh, okay.
I am.
Okay, great. Okay, so Tiffany Negro from Pettingill House is here, and she is going to give us an update on the rental assistance, emergency rental assistance program. So we did receive your report from updated 9/11.
Yep. So on that report, you saw that we've assisted 9 households to date, including 10 adults, 1 elder, and 4 children. We do have at this point 15 applications that are pending, 8 since we last met in August. So some of it, the difference of like 7 have been pending for several months. I think it's just, it could be the client themselves or the landlord that we're still waiting back on for paperwork. Some of it's the bank statement that they'll just send the first page, but we're looking for the complete bank statement to see, especially like if they're getting unemployment or some other type of income, and that's how they're using it as verification. We're looking for all pages. So I think things are going well, that I feel like there's been more exposure. I know that there was another, the mayor did some more PR. I know that it's been put out on Facebook. We've been working with the Essex County asset builders and family to family. There were cards that went out all through the local food pantries. So we received 3 referrals through that process. So I think, I don't know if families, what we're seeing with some of the families that have applied that received unemployment, they didn't use their unemployment to pay for some of their rent. Some did, but some didn't pay at all. So some of them are quite far behind. So I'm hoping with this moratorium being lifted, if in fact it is lifted in October, that we don't get this surge of families and individuals that haven't paid since March. The moratorium gets lifted, and then they're hundreds, thousands of dollars behind. So, because then that's a big crisis. So we're continuing to reach families, kind of help them before the crisis hits, come up with some strategies to be able to pay their rent, because unfortunately the issue is continuing. Jobs have been lost because businesses have closed, hours have been cut, and families have had to stay home because of the remote or hybrid learning. So and we're waiting on Congress for this new stimulus package. So I'm trying to stay positive. We're here to help families and support them the best we can with the rental funds and other support services. But our goal is to reach the families now before it becomes a crisis. And they are getting an eviction letter. So hopefully that doesn't happen, and we can work with landlords. I know that was brought up last time about asking about forgiveness. Like, can we, if they're $4,000 behind, is the landlord willing to forgive a certain amount? So, the tenant can pay a portion, we could pay a portion, and the landlord, in essence, would help pay a portion. I think that some of it too, I've gotten a little feedback just from the staff about some of the people that have applied. Is, oh, I didn't realize I could apply online. So they were calling, waiting for a paper app. And we said, oh no, there's an online portal. So I think, it's still fairly new. So I think it's just providing that education. We are still encouraging to apply for RAFT funding. I know that Bob Gould is back at Community Action. So he was away for quite some time this past summer. So, working with him and families to get some RAFT funding if they're eligible. And they're offering more, they meaning like Community Teamwork, who runs the RAFT program, they're offering more of the workshops for families, because sometimes they were running only like one workshop. And that's difficult sometimes for families that are working but still need the financial assistance. So they're offering both in English and Spanish multiple times a week. So I think that's a quick update in a nutshell.
Tiffany, are those CPI trainings virtual?
Yes.
That's great.
Yep, there's links that they can log on and Zoom in. Yeah.
So are you finding that landlords are providing some relief?
So we haven't had any at this point. There are a few that have that are overseen by property management companies that I think because they have more flexibility for maybe an individual that owns a home, that we may be able to get a little bit of forgiveness. But no, to date, we haven't had any.
And you had mentioned that there were 15 pending. So that's even more than what's on your report to us. So there's
Yes, because there's some new ones that have come in. Yeah, even since we sent the report on the 11th.
Yeah. Okay.
One thing I was thinking about is, Tiffany, when you said if the moratorium expires October 17th, about that kind of tsunami.
Yeah.
But, I was just on a call today, and I guess if it does expire October 17th, then the federal moratorium is going to kick in, and that's through the end of the year.
Oh, great.
So it's just kind of kicking the can down the road. But
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, not that we want to see anyone evicted ever, but I don't even know how anyone could even do that during winter, right? And displace families and individuals. And there's not enough housing. There's not enough shelter. So there has to be some more thought about how we're actually going to get out of this housing crisis. And they don't have the infrastructure at the courthouses. Once
That's
a
true.
landlord actually puts it into motion to actually be held before a judge, that's gonna, I don't know how many people would be in that situation, but I would assume it would take, I don't know, years maybe to actually get everyone into court and to actually get the process. So I'm also, a couple of our staff at the end of the month are going to be on a webinar with the Department of Housing and Community Development through the state. And it's a training around, it's around the state shelter, assisting families that are becoming homeless. So I'm curious to see if there's going to be any amendments to their rule, because generally, if you've been in the system within that year, you're not allowed to re-enter. But if there are families that are facing eviction, if they do, in fact, say it's January, February the next year, and they've been in the shelter system, I can only imagine that they have to have some leniency to allow families into the system. So more will follow on that. There's got to be new policies written around that. So let's see. I think
Tiffany, are you concerned about these families, these 15 families that are pulling together their paperwork and stuff? Are you concerned that that this is too hard for them to get their applications in, or are you confident that if they really need the help, they'll get you what you need?
Well, some have been pending for some time since one was, let's see, a few have been actually since July. And again, we look at self-sufficiency because we want to make sure that they're stable, that they're following the process, that they're applying for unemployment if they hadn't filed for unemployment, that there was a situation, a gentleman, I guess his mom lived with him, and then she moved out with another family member, and then some roommates moved in and they moved out. So he can't financially afford it on his own. So we don't want to, not we don't want to, but it doesn't make sense to provide money if they can't self-sustain that rent beyond. Like, we're coming up with solutions of like, okay, you are an elder and you qualify for elderly public housing, and it's self-determination. And again, we don't want to see anyone evicted, but it's really just educating them about like what is available, what your options are, and what the outcome may be if you don't follow through. So yeah, there are some concerns about some of the people that have applied haven't followed through even to date. It's been like a month or so. Like, one of them also hasn't provided documentation for the landlord, hasn't given permission. So that's part of it. Like, we do a landlord verification. We get a W-9 from the landlord. Are they tenant in good standings overall? I know that's a difficult situation that they haven't paid their rent, but like prior to COVID, were they paying on time? And have they showed good faith to at least pay something? And we do, what are they in arrears to date? So, we keep following up, emails, calls. It is hard because we're still not face-to-face, and we won't be. So everything that we're providing is remote. We do curbside at our pantry, and we could always do curbside like at their house, or like a porch curbside. But yeah, I mean, the thought and the hope is if they need the help, that they're going to follow through. And we're patient, we'll give time. But I don't, and we try to remove barriers and work with them and, come up with creative solutions. But, it's just, we don't want anyone, like I said, to be in the situation that they're evicted. So.
Right.
And
But
unfortunately, because that stimulus of the $600 went away, there's some of the residents can't afford the rent. We had an individual that had moved just prior to COVID, has a pretty significant rental amount, and really can't afford it. So again, it's what is a solution for her? It is to move to find more of affordable housing. She's a young child, so she has to be there for childcare, or find an alternative, a friend or family member that can help when the child is remote at this point, or hopefully get a job that she can work from home remotely. But that's in a perfect world, which we're not living in right now. So at this point, we're thankful that the moratorium is protecting families, while we kind of figure things out with them and come up with some additional solutions. So.
And there's no, I don't have your chart in front of me, but there's no one that is bumping up against. I think we have a $3,000 maximum. Is that right?
I think it was 4,500.
Yeah, 45.
45. Okay. And there's nobody that's bumping up against that.
Wow.
So there's 3 that are, I shouldn't say 3. Let me see. There's a few that have actually received the 45
Yeah.
over the 3 months.
So what will happen to those people? I mean, I don't expect you to have the answer. But
I know.
it's a question.
It is. So what we're doing, and what I work with the staff member that is taking the applications and following up, is like, let's call them back. Let's reassess for this next month, especially if the last month that we helped was September and that was their 3rd month. Like, what is the plan? Has unemployment come back? Are they able to afford it? Have they found a job? Is there some other funding in the area that can help? Because again, it's to no fault of their own. It's just, but yeah, there are, looks like 3 that have hit the maximum amount. 3 out of the 9.
Oh, right.
Well, that's
So
concerning to me.
Yes. So you mentioned raft.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's still hopefully
I know.
an option.
Right.
And Irma, so at least if somebody's at 80%,
Right.
yeah. But yeah, it's a concern.
Well, do we want to consider suggesting to Tiffany that Pat and Gil let us know if there's a need for making an exception to this $4,500 max? I'm just throwing that out there.
I think it's good to be notified. Hesitant once you start exceptions, it's a slippery slope. And I feel like we need to be unbiased in the way that we're allocating funds. If we're finding there's a lot of people it's affecting, we could consider allowing a higher maximum. We're going back, but I'm a little hesitant about exceptions unless it seems really kind of extraordinary.
And
Right.
I would definitely do that if we've exhausted all avenues, and if they received raft funding or some extenuating circumstance, absolutely, I could reach out and provide an update. But again, that's what I was talking about before, like coming up with some creative solutions about and doing check-ins like for the families that have reached the max. I know there is one that she has a child, she receives, I think, Social Security, and she was actually working part-time, but the part-time job is not, obviously because she's home with her child, but she may be able to make ends meet with unemployment. So, it may be helping in other areas, like, okay, let's see if your food stamps are maximized, and, let's help with our food pantries, and let's make sure that, if you need a clothing voucher, because we don't want you to spend money on clothing because that's an expense. So, yeah, just working with our partners to see what we can do.
I really appreciate you taking that holistic view too. I think that's great.
Well, yeah, that's the advantage of having Pet and Gil work.
Yeah,
with
it
us,
is.
so,
It
yeah.
is. Mhm.
Right, and because we don't want the families to feel like it's endless and the help's there, like they have to empower themselves and, continue to look for employment, and not to, really feel like, oh, I have X amount of dollars before I exhaust my employment, right? It's, if you're able to get back to work.
Right.
Okay, any other questions for Tiffany?
No,
Judy,
thank you very much.
can I just make a comment?
John?
Hi.
Yes, sure, John.
John?
I know it hasn't been with Newburyport funds, but Pet and Gill has been extremely helpful in Salisbury with a number of our tenants, and it's been fabulous working with them. We've been able to aggressively go after the RAFT funds and then the CDBG funds that Salisbury made available through Pet and Gill House. And between those two, it's been a lifesaver for so many of our tenants. And having that resource available and being able to go through Pet and Gill for our tenants has just been wonderful.
That's great. Good to
Partnership,
hear.
John.
Thanks.
Good to know.
Yeah, and I know, and I'd mentioned the family to family, and that's specifically, we had like our social work kind of little task force come together, and Ellie Davis from the Y was on the task force, and we're getting a lot of referrals that way. And again, it's like Ellie saying, "Oh, that's one of our residents," so we do a lot of collaboration and making sure that families are stabilized. So
Great.
it's a great community, greater Newburyport community.
Right. Right.
Because we can't do it in isolation, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. Good job.
Thanks very much, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Yeah, anything else for Tiffany before she leaves? Okay, thanks, Tiffany. Thanks for the
All
update.
right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so next on the agenda is an update on the YWCA Cottage Court project, and we have John Fian here, Executive Director of the YWCA. Hi, John.
Hello. Thank you for giving me this chance to talk about Hillside. So we do have some good news finally to report. Things have finally started getting back on track, and we have a tentative construction start date of October 19th. That is dependent on getting all the permits in place right now, which I believe David Hall is working on, and also getting the bids in. So it's changed a little bit. David Hall has actually contracted out the construction to LD Russo. So at least we're very familiar with who's going to be building it. Nat's been working to try to get the prices together and to get finalized prices, and then get the subs lined up to start the work. But they, fingers crossed, they're going to start October 19th. So, I think everybody's aware we've had a number of setbacks. Some of them were technical, and some of them were, I don't know. I can't, we're not in charge of this project in the sense that we're buying a turnkey building from David Hall. So we're kind of dependent on him to get the project going. But some of the technical problems that we faced when they moved to make it a passive house design, passive housing is more for single family type units. So in all his other units, it's one family who's living in an apartment. And that's not the case for what we've got in a lodging house. We've got 10 different people living there in 10 separate rooms with 10 separate doors that stay closed all the time. So the technical challenge on this was trying to make sure that the ventilation and the HVAC was going to be adequate, both to make sure that people were comfortable, but then also to make sure that the air circulation was sufficient and met the the goals of what you have to do for air circulation. Oddly enough, one of the challenges with this house was that normally you would do some level of dehumidification using an air conditioner. And when they looked at trying to put an air conditioner in, because of the design of the frame of the building, they literally could not find a small enough air conditioner that would run constantly through the day and do the dehumidification. So they ended up having to do some other device called a Zender air handling unit, which makes me a little bit nervous because it's really kind of way out there, cutting edge type of stuff. But so they've designed it now in with those different mechanical units into it, and that's set it back several months. And then of course the whole crisis with COVID set it back another set of months, and so it's just been a challenging project. But the good news is I think we're back on track now to getting it done.
So it sounds like he's looking to get the foundation in October. I don't know.
Hopefully more than that. When we did 11 Market Street, we didn't start that until February.
Right.
So we've got an unfortunate history of starting these projects when it's really cold out.
I remember.
And LD Russo's been good. As long as the weather cooperates and they can pour the cement and get the things in, then they've been troopers and have, gone right through the bad weather. So.
Yeah. So what's the total construction time? Was it a year or?
Well, they're hoping for 9. They're hoping for 9 months, but I've learned that LD Russo 9 months is more like 10, 11, and that's. When we did Salisbury, they hit a crisis where the HVAC was running a little bit behind. But then that pushed the next contractor who was doing the drywall way behind. And so we had the whole place done and we were waiting for the guy to come in and do the mudding of the walls for the drywall. And we just sat around and twiddled our thumbs for several weeks while we waited for somebody to show up and do that work. So it's sometimes it's beyond their control in terms of, getting things implemented. I am a little concerned on pushing this project too quickly, simply because there are some of the mechanicals are really technical, and we want to make sure that we get a couple sets of eyes on them as the process goes along, because I'm not sure they're systems that Nat is familiar with in terms of installing, or anybody local is, to be honest.
John, I have 2 questions. One is, my recollection is that the tenants will have their own bathroom, but it's shared kitchens. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How is your feeling about that now with COVID-19 problems?
Yeah, we've been dealing with it for the past 6 months at Market Street, where we've got people sharing bathrooms and kitchens. And what we've done is we've talked with folks about making this a team effort And we've been very successful with that. And people are looking out for themselves and they're looking out for each other. And they've kind of taken a very positive, holistic approach, and we've been very successful. So at this point in the process, I'm not sure that there's anything we could do because just so much time and effort and money has gone into the current design. And COVID's not going to be here forever. We will get past this eventually.
Right. Okay. And my other question is, have you given or has somebody given an update to DHCD on the status?
Yes. Yeah. I did one at the beginning of September, and then I did another one the end of August, and then I did another one just 2 weeks ago. I just learned that the construction date was set about a week ago.
Great.
So far, they've been good. They've been hanging in there with us. When the whole COVID crisis came up, I got in touch with them right away to let them know that, we had this problem, and they were very willing to help. I will say that in the redesign work that was done on the project, we did end up doing a new purchase and sales with Holland Moscow that raised the total cost about $300,000. So over the summer, I worked with Federal Home Loan Bank, and I submitted a Federal Home Loan Bank application to cover that difference. And
But you don't know yet if you got that funding, right?
no, we won't know
You'll
that
find out in
until
December, right?
December. Yeah. And we do have a commitment from David Hall that until we find that other $300,000, he will provide us essentially 0% gap funding with no principal payments until we get it funded.
Did you score well when you self-scored with the FHLB application?
No.
Oh,
No, and it was beyond our control. I did everything. I actually ended up adding 2 homeless units to the mix. In so much, when we look at Salisbury, I think we reserved 11 units for homeless, and we ended up serving like 17 or 18 homeless households. So adding the fact that we were going to serve 2 homeless households was not a huge stretch for us, just given the population that we're serving. And that got us up to like 67.7 points, and 67 is their kind of anything below that rarely gets funded. So we're right on the edge. What we couldn't control was the amount that we were borrowing compared to the amount that we were asking for in a grant. And so the more you borrow, because it's a bank, the more points you get.
right.
And so out of 12 points, I think we got like 3.5 points on that score. And that was it. I mean, that's what killed us. And there was nothing we could do about it.
It's ironic. Really doing so well in that way, but yeah, it's ironic.
Yeah. The one thing you can't control is what dinged us the worst.
Yeah.
Did you get CPA money already for this project? I can't.
Yes, we did. Yep.
And do you remember how much?
150,000.
Going for more there.
Yeah, if we had to, we've got a plan B, and I think plan B would be, Franklin Square House Foundation, going back to CPA and asking for a little bit more there, and then maybe some other private foundations that I think would be able to do, and then a little bit of private fundraising. So I'm not, obviously, I'd like to get it all at one place at FHLB, just because it's easier to have one funding source versus 11 funding sources is always easier.
But you don't seem too worried about filling the gap. It seems like you feel like you can do it somehow.
Yeah. We've made it through the past 6 months, so I figure, we can do anything now.
Right. Always the optimist.
Yeah.
Well,
It does get me in trouble.
nice to see you being optimistic, John.
Yeah, well, that's Judy. That's the difference between what you get to see privately as a board member and what I say publicly at all these events.
Right. There you go.
You know,
I mean, you could go back to DHCD, but that's never a simple process.
No,
And
and
timing it's not a quick process.
yeah, no, and I talked with them a little bit about it, and it did not get a warm reception at all. So I didn't
Okay.
push on it at all. And, you know, I kind of let them know that this is what was happening and that the price was going to go up, and how did they want to, you know, address it in terms of all the performance that we submitted. And they were like, oh, just change the performance, just don't ask us for money. And I was like, okay, well, that gives me my answer. So.
Okay.
And I've been talking with FHLB about this project for a couple of years, so they're well aware of it. And at some level, Toby was the original one who encouraged me to put the bathrooms in each unit instead of having shared bathrooms. So she's very familiar with the program, and I think she's certainly cheering for us to have this thing funded. And plus, it's a cutting edge project. I mean, there are no other, you know, passive design lodging houses out there. There are no other net zero lodging houses that are being proposed anywhere, because it turns out it's really difficult to do.
Which is the other area I was thinking about for funding, is, you know, from some kind of environmental groups who want to showcase it in that way.
Yeah.
Well, you sound like you're really hanging in there, and it's happening. So, you
Yeah.
know, slowly, but it's happening, which is
Yeah, that's great.
And just a little, if you don't mind, just a little perspective on Salisbury. You know, we've got 42 units. They're all full. We have been working very aggressively with the majority of our tenants around using their, you know, when they got the unemployment benefits, you know, our tenants were good, and they paid their rents. And when they got the stimulus checks, they paid any back rent that they might have had. And then the RAFT program has really been fabulous. It's really, really kept our tenants going. And so we've been successful throughout the crisis in terms of collecting rents and, you know, providing all the services that we've been providing over there. We really do worry that the longer this thing drags out, because a lot of our tenants are unemployed, and the longer this drags out, the more stretched the available resources are. And unless the federal government comes back up with the unemployment assistance, you know, we worry that long term it's not going to be as easy to do. But at least for now, we're doing well.
How many of your tenants have mobile vouchers, and how many project-based vouchers do you have? Do you know?
We have 16 project-based vouchers, and we have, I think at last count, 6 mobile vouchers. And Newburyport Housing Authority was fabulous in trying to get us some tenants through one of the programs that they have, and I think we ended up with 3 of their tenants, their clients.
Mm-hmm. Well, that helps.
Yeah, and I know somebody mentioned earlier about landlord forgiveness, and just, you know, from, you know, the forgiveness that we got on the loan for the YWCA was not forgiveness at all. It was simply a deferment of our mortgage obligations. And in fact, when the mortgage starts up again next month, it's going to be 100% interest until we've paid off all the interest that accumulated over the past 6 months. And then we'll be able to begin paying down our principal once again. So if homeowners or, you know, or small landlords take advantage of that, those kind of loan deferment programs, long term, it really puts them in a hole. I mean, the banks are making out like bandits, and you know, so it's hard, I think, to ask landlords to do too much in terms of forgiveness, because like nobody's forgiving them anything long term.
What bank is it? What bank are you with?
Institution.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, can't they just add that to the tail? Like, can't they just add it to the principal and let you pay, just pick up your payments as usual?
You might have thought that that's what they could have done, but that's not what they did.
That's what a lot of banks are doing. So that's why I'm asking. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a pressure for us to apply to institution? I mean, that's just, there are banks that are definitely doing more of a forbearance kind of thing, you know,
Yeah.
that are putting it at the end and not charging interest and all that. I'm frankly quite surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
And dismayed.
Well, I haven't hit them up for a big donation yet, but we will be doing that soon.
Offset it, yeah.
So on the, so has Pettingill been helping you get the raft?
They've helped us both a little bit with Raft. Ellie's been working very closely with them. But then once we get Raft, some of our tenants need a little bit extra help. And then Pettingill's been very, very good at working with us to get the extra help. They've been helpful in terms of, as Tiffany was saying, getting that wider range of services. I think back in, what was it, March and April, Ellie very quickly went around to all our tenants, and Jillian did the same and said, you've got to apply for unemployment, and here's how. And they helped them get onto the unemployment. And then Pettingill was helpful in other ways in terms of food stamps and, in food assistance and, some of those other different programs. But I know that Jillian, Ellie, and Pettingill have been working very closely together for a lot of our tenants.
And any COVID in the development?
We have been very fortunate. As far as we know, there's been nobody.
That's great.
Yep.
That's great.
And we did reopen our preschool program in July. So it's open as well. So if you know folks that are looking for childcare, and we do it on a sliding fee. So if, lower income working folks, we can work with them and we accept vouchers and trying to get that program back up to full.
Great.
And keep COVID out.
Yeah. Here's the trick.
Okay, anything else for John? That's a great update.
Yes, thank you very much, John.
Thanks a lot, John.
You're welcome. This is a great format. I know we'd all rather be around the table saying hi to each other, but being able to do this through this medium is wonderful. So thank you for the opportunity.
Sure, thanks for being here.
But the construction's going to be starting next month or soon thereafter. That's great.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. All righty. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next on the
Can I
agenda.
just say before we move on, I'm outraged about institution. What the hell? I mean, they're supposed to be this wonderful community bank, and this is what they're doing? Not that I can do anything about it. I'm very surprised. I'm very surprised and very dismayed.
Yeah, see, I have nothing to judge that against. I don't know. Maybe Suzanne knows more, and certainly you guys know more than I do as to what the banks are doing and what they're allowing.
Yeah, no, it's typically, well, at least in our world, we're seeing that the 90-day principal and interest added to the principal of the mortgage, so basically added back in. But when the payments resume, there's no payment shock and there's nothing to pay down. You just keep paying. You just have that, when you go to pay off, you have that little extra. Yeah, which makes it easier.
And it just means, it's you just have a longer, I've heard from a couple of CDCs, it's just so we were supposed to pay this off in 10 years, we're going to pay it off in 12 years or whatever. But
or not even, yeah,
Yeah.
It really depends. If things go back to normal, you can make a couple principal payments and, you're back to where you need to be. But the thing that sort of, you have interest only until you pay it off, and then that's
crazy.
cumbersome. Yeah, especially for a nonprofit, I would think
Yeah.
there should be a way to negotiate, but who knows?
I assume John tried that, but
Yeah.
I'm just, well, I don't know what to do about it. I'm just surprised by it. And especially, if there was some way we could advocate, especially for, I can't speak to institution for how they handle most businesses, but, a nonprofit that's trying to provide affordable housing like that, why would they do that?
Yeah. Can you, I'm sorry, I should have asked this earlier, but those cost overruns were related to the restrooms? Was that why, that the,
No, it was the passive, the features that's making it so energy,
oh, okay.
efficient and stuff.
Hmm.
It's probably also just time, costs going up, maybe having more firm pricing now than when they originally estimated it. I mean, that's what I was assuming, but he was talking about passive houses being one of the complexities of the deal.
So would that be still because they haven't broken ground? Could that potentially be considered pre-development expense?
Well, the design part,
That's what I was
Right.
thinking.
Are you thinking
Yeah,
of
I
where to
mean-
fund it?
Yeah.
fund it, I'm not following.
I was wondering, Suzanne, if you're thinking of a way to fund
Yeah,
that.
no,
as
I
a
was
source.
thinking of pre-development grant funds or something, that would
Mhm.
help plug the gap a little bit.
I think what they need is construction. I think they need additional permanent funding to fill the gap. I don't think it's a pre-development challenge they have. But John didn't seem particularly concerned. I think we kind of gave him the opening to make a pitch for some additional local funds.
He didn't.
He doesn't seem ready to do that yet. The FHLB is a great source, but it's really hard to count on it, and they
Sure.
won't know until December, and I don't know when in December. So that's hard, I think.
It sounds
And-
like that he has a cheerleader there, which is good. It's not a big place. It's,
Yeah, well, I don't know. I've been in his shoes before, and they'll tell you, oh, you've got a very competitive application, but then, you don't get it. And,
Yeah.
it's a great project, but if you don't score, a certain way, and like you said, the fact that they have very little perm debt is hurts their scoring. So,
Yeah, I think my experience from what I've heard from folks, I mean, Toby's great, but she is a cheerleader for everybody. I mean, she loves everybody's projects kind of thing. So I don't know that, that's just sort of her
Right.
personality and her nature.
right.
I think it is the scoring, and they have a very, it's supposed to be a very transparent kind of process, and it's the scoring. So,
Unlike so many other sources of funding that you can go after, it's very systematic. But
there's
he
always,
not concerned, I mean, it seems concerning to me.
he was giving us his public face, it sounded like.
yeah, there's
Well,
enough space. So there's always the institution for savings to hit them up for a huge donation for that project.
It sounds like that's the way he's going, to sort of offset what they're doing with the loan, which if that works, that's fine. Yeah. Well, we can move on. I just wanted to raise that I was a little outraged by that, but say la vie.
Yep. Okay. Next we have section 6C update from Andy.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm just going to change the screen view right now just to show a draft document. Okay. Do you all see this?
Yes.
So, and Caitlin can jump in as well, but I think Judy, and let me know if there's anything else you want from this, but my understanding is the Housing Trust wanted just an update of what the planning board's considering for the 6C zoning section. They've been talking for a number of years. It's come up periodically, changes that might make sense to the 6C section. And I can summarize that in just a minute, but it's my understanding you're interested in what the changes are they're thinking about making right now, and particularly with respect to the affordable housing component. So I don't know if before I go over what they're looking at, does somebody have any questions generically or concerns? No. Okay.
Yeah, it was in relation to their the change for affordable housing is what I wanted people to know about.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, if no one's interested in the other aspects of the 6C change, I can sort of skip over those and just go right to the affordable housing component.
Yep.
Okay. So, if you look at this highlighted paragraph here, this is essentially more or less what they were talking about at the very last meeting. So last night, this is conceptually what they're talking about, making when someone wants to do a second dwelling unit that's on a lot with two structures on it, $10 per square foot is how it's multiplied to determine the amount of money they need to give to the housing trust fund. There was talk several years back, I don't remember how many years back at this point, but there was discussion at one point about having almost like a table in this section of the ordinance that would specify based on a project size, what the amount might be. But this is where they're thinking right now, going to basically say if someone's going to be creating a market rate unit, then they have to contribute, $10 per square foot of the size of that unit. There was also discussion in that conversation about whether or not that would help also to reduce the size of the second unit being, constructed. Maybe they'd sort of balance out what they'd have to pay, and that might reduce the size of the other unit, and therefore that might have a benefit, like a sort of almost like a little A affordability impact, if you will. But that's in summary what they're thinking about right now.
Okay.
We don't often see the 6C section used with affordable housing, just FYI.
Well, that was my question that was one question, Andy. And my second was, where does the $10 per square foot come from? Is that used elsewhere? I'm just curious.
No, I don't recall there being mention of exactly where that number came from. I believe that Don Walters and Tanya Hartford, there was some sort of discussion they had about that, but they had done some looking at other communities, and of course, not to anybody's surprise, I think found that there wasn't really a comparable provision they could find somewhere else that was a good sort of example to glean off of. But we can find out, we can circle back with them, we can find out and let you know where that sort of originated from. There was, I should mention, by the way, there was some discussion, I think it was Bonnie who had suggested, because again, they've been playing around with, any type of structure or formula for, because basically projects are not usually of a size where someone can absorb an entire unit being built, right? Ideally, you want them to build the unit and not defer it to a later date. The city or the trust would then have to spend money on mobilizing a contractor. Whereas if the development's already underway, there's a cost savings there. So it makes more sense to have them actually build the unit. I think you all know that. And that's the preference in your inclusionary ordinance. But their assumption here with most of the 6Cs that they've gotten over the years. And by the way, they were at one point discussing the possibility of even deleting the 6C section, but that's another whole debate. But when the 6C section is used, they're typically smaller projects, one or two houses on a lot. And oftentimes we're seeing now the preservation restriction being proposed as the so-called public benefit. But the projects aren't big enough with just 2 units for someone to say, yeah, I'll contribute or make one of those affordable, based on any other ratios we've seen. And so the debate has always been, well, what's enough of a contribution to the housing trust to satisfy that type of public benefit?
So they just,
Is this a
essentially
starting
trying to
point?
codify something. What's it?
Is this a starting point? Can we try to up the ante here or what?
Oh yeah, I mean, right now, if you're talking about negotiation, you're only negotiating with the planning board. The city council ultimately will adopt this. So right now, this is being conceived of as a planning board recommendation to the city council to modify the 6C section. We'll confirm who might be the sponsor on the council for the amendment, but certainly there could be conversation about how to adjust this and whether or not this is the right structure to use either. Bonnie had brought up the concept, at least for discussion purposes, of saying, well, what's the value of the market rate unit, which I think you can only really determine by some sort of appraisal or comps out there. But what's the value of the market rate unit minus, what's an affordable unit, going for right now. And you sort of, well, if you take that gap in there, maybe that's what they have to give to, the Affordable Housing Trust. So there's different ways to do this. And the planning board has discussed this in different ways over the years, feeling like the results of 6C are sort of mixed and not necessarily a whole lot of affordable housing maybe coming from it. So this is essentially an attempt to sort of codify a threshold for a payment in lieu type scenario.
That's a huge difference, Andy. I mean, if you're talking about the difference between, I mean, I don't know how big a new house is. Say it's 1,500 square feet, that's $15,000. As opposed to if you're comparing a market rate unit to an affordable rate, you're talking, 100,000 or something like that. And that's not what I'm suggesting.
Like more than 100,000.
More, yeah, 200,000 even. I mean, 3. I mean, depending,
Right.
yeah, how high end it is.
It seems like a very low dollar amount.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like much to me, but I don't.
It's more than what we're getting, right?
Right.
It's more, even at the 10, if you're looking at a 2,500 square foot dwelling, you're talking about 25,000. If you up it, it's, more, 37.5 or whatever, So it's significantly more than what we have been getting.
Sure.
So, but I'd still like to push this up to 15 or 20 would be really nice, but.
Yeah, and maybe wherever you come out tonight, or if you want to continue this discussion, I know that I don't know exactly what the time frame will be for the council to take up this amendment. It's after the planning board submits it, but if you're able to either tonight or at a future meeting, recommend a specific change to this, whether it's, the dollar amount or something else, then we can transfer that or convey that to the planning board. Or you can, of course, attend the hearing that's going to happen on this at some point. But in either way, it might be able to influence or change what's initially proposed to the city council when it goes into the docket.
So when are they planning to submit it?
Well, my sense is that they just want to do another review of this at their next meeting. And then, basically, I'm just basically going to take there's a couple of other changes in here that are not related to affordable housing. And so I was just going to tweak that to reformat it into a proper amendment to be put before the city council. And there's a couple of other things in here, like I said, that are being adjusted, but it's more to deal with like neighborhood compatibility issues. And so at any rate, I suspect after the next meeting that they'll want to forward that as a recommendation to the city council and then defer to the council on what the time frame might be for scheduling the hearing.
Well, let's suggest that they make it 20 instead of 10.
What's a typical new, a new dwelling, a second dwelling on a lot? What would the typical size of that be? Do you have any idea, Andy?
To me, it seems conceivable that these units are going to be, in excess of 1,500 square feet. They're going to be at 2,000 square foot.
Okay.
They seem to be larger units from what I can see. What's been done over the time that I've been here. They're not really small accessory units.
Okay.
They're whole new houses.
They're full, yeah.
And that's been one of the concerns that was been raised by planning board members who support affordable housing. Saying, well, are we really achieving any affordability if we're just creating another market rate unit? They're getting a substantial amount of value on these lots. We're giving them a relief, to allow them to have that second dwelling on the lot. But, shouldn't we be getting more out of that? So that goes back to maybe the number here. But
Yeah, let's make it 25.
right.
They can negotiate it down.
Did you say there's no sponsor yet, or?
I don't believe they've confirmed a sponsor yet. Yeah.
So I hear 25.
Well, I think it's a starting, I think, whatever.
Anyone going for 30? Do I hear 30?
I don't know. It's sort of arbitrary, but.
It is. It is arbitrary. But if they're going to discuss it once more.
Right.
When I've talked to Bonnie about this, they were thinking about giving money to the open space committee. So at least that changed.
Well, we certainly can propose 30. I don't know the politics of this, and if we go too high, if it's just crazy, but it really isn't that crazy. $60,000, if it's a 2,000 square foot house, $60,000 still doesn't even come close to building a new unit. But obviously it does help us to help someone do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these homes are probably going for, just under $1 million when they're done anyway. So
Yeah,
it's a
right.
small drop in the bucket if someone is able to pay that amount of money to, make a contribution here, whether it's through the initial developer or the person who's ultimately buying it.
These buyers will come in and put $60,000 into heating their driveway
Right, right, right.
or putting in their outdoor TV and their outdoor patio and everything else we see happening. So yeah,
So I so move that we suggest that the amount be $30 per square foot.
second,
I'll second.
all in favor? Alan,
Yeah,
unmuted yet.
I don't know if Alan's
it's
in favor.
easy, if we end up at, whatever, it's easy to start where we're starting than to try to jack it up later, so.
Oh,
But-
definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and so Caitlin and I can pass that feedback on to them, and maybe that will be, absorbed and incorporated into it before they recommend to the city council, and that way it'll be less of a, you won't be negotiating up during the public hearing. You'll be, if anybody wants to try to push down, they'd have to do it from there. So,
Okay, good.
okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Andy.
What's next? Updates? Any other updates? Other updates from the planning office? I think Kate updated us on the resales in the staff report.
Yep, I provided a few updates, but I did send around the RFP for, home funds.
Right.
So those are due, I believe, end of October, October 23rd. So I just wanted to know if you wanted to have a quick discussion about that at this meeting, since that date is coming up quickly.
Yeah, I would also add to that. I've only been involved in 1 or 2 cycles of that. Typically the staff planner is dealing with that, working with the housing trust, but and the mayor. But it's a relatively, compared to some of the programs that we're talking about, a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant and some other grants like that from the federal and state government, and those are very complicated. But this is a relatively straightforward program that I think is well worth a little bit of time. If you can propose something, it's a smooth funding process, and certainly the funds could be used. So I would definitely suggest going after it if you and the mayor can agree on whatever that priority should be.
Do you have any suggestions on what the program would be, what the use of funds would be?
I do not at this point. I'd want to read their most recent material just to see if there's a particular area that they're focused on this time around.
Is that where we got down payment assistance from in the past?
CPA has given down payment assistance, right?
I
Yeah,
think
that's
they
right.
used to do that, but I don't think they do anymore.
Okay. I thought that was-
So one thing that I noticed in here was rental assistance. And I had thought that home funds were rather cumbersome in terms of requirements.
Reporting.
I may be wrong, but that's what I recall.
All right, cumbersome in what way?
Cumbersome in that they require the environmental review. And I just remember, offering our home funds even to John Feehan, and he didn't want to take it on because of the paperwork involved and the requirements involved.
Would it make sense? Obviously he's not on right now, but maybe circling back with him and just refreshing what that issue was and seeing if that has some bearing on how you want to proceed with this.
Yes, anybody else have any comments on that? Who knows more about?
I think home funding is extremely bureaucratic. I think you're absolutely right, Judy. But I guess what I would suggest, when I worked in Salem at the CDC there, I used to go to the North Shore Home Consortium meetings. They're held regularly, and all the towns that are part of the consortium attend, and they talk about how they're using their funds. And it used to be the small towns used to do the down payment assistance. That was the only thing going for them, you know? Now a lot of the area nonprofits use it for their development initiatives because they're fortunate enough to have a development initiative. And so then the nonprofit deals with all that bureaucratic stuff. And they're well equipped to do it because they've got the staff and they're maybe using home funds from the state anyway. So this is just another layer of bureaucracy that they're already dealing with. But it could be that some of the communities in our consortium area are doing something innovative with these local home funds. I have no way of knowing. It seems like it's worth, you know, there might be some information on their website. Kevin Hurley is really approachable. He's a great source of information. I think we've talked before about reaching out to him and finding out what other communities are doing using these home funds. I'm concerned that maybe we don't have time now because applications are due in October. I don't know. I'll take a look at the RFP. I didn't do that before this meeting, but you know, it seems like it would have been possibly a good thing for John Fian to do for this Y project, you know, as a way to fill this gap. But I think it sounds like he wants to keep it as simple as possible. I don't know. I can't.
I remember him, like you were saying, Judy, I remember him kind of rejecting using home funds in the past because he didn't feel it was worth the bureaucratic.
But in this case, he is working with some DHCD funding already.
True.
But he probably knows about this funding source.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at it here. I mean, we've got Davis-Bacon requirements, we've got uniform administrative, affirmative marketing, environmental review, lead-based paint abatement, flood provisions. I mean, some of those are standard in any, you know, mortgage applications, but some of them are not.
Well, Davis-Bacon would not apply unless certain things trigger it. And most of the uses of these home funds work around the threshold requirements that trigger Davis-Bacon. So but it, you know, you do this municipality or whomever has to do an environmental review. It's not that hard, but it is something that has to be done. And then I think there's a lot of reporting requirements over time.
Right.
But you work hand in hand with the North Shore Home Consortium. I mean, that's what they do. They work with all these, I think it's like 27 municipalities in the area. And many of them are very small, don't have much administrative capacity. So, I mean, I think it can be done. It's just, I'm not sure we have enough time to pull it all together.
Well, I guess the question is then for what? I mean, like if something was happening with the Brown School right now, you know, I'd say that would be a great potential source, but that's obviously not relevant right now.
Right.
I would think rental assistance would be complicated. I mean, when you think about, you know, administering a rental assistance program, that sounds very complicated to me.
Yeah, that's what's needed out there. But I mean, occasionally I just get, you know, Sue McKittrick will send me an email saying, do you know of any, you know, either units or any funding source for rental assistance? That comes up, you know, once every few months I get an email from her about that. But yeah, that would require that, you know, Caitlin, our staff person, would be running that was something similar to the housing rehab program, and that was a full-time job.
Yeah.
I don't think we want to go there.
It's not a huge pot of money either, is it? Isn't it like 1.5 million or something? I think that's what I saw. I'm not trying to be a naysayer. I feel like it's something maybe we should consider for the future. I mean, we can investigate it now, but maybe this is something to think more seriously about for next year.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's been brought to our attention because I think it is an interesting opportunity. I'm just concerned that we don't have time to pull together a program.
Yeah, the total amount is 1.5. Yep.
So do we want to do a little bit, of research and then kind of circle back? Because I think last year, I think there was a, vote, I guess, to release the funds back into like the pool of funding. I remember last year we did that. So maybe at our next meeting, we can kind of circle back after we've looked at the RFP a little bit more and talk about it in like 2 or 3 weeks.
So there's a certain amount that is allocated to Newburyport, is that correct?
Yeah, there's an allocation for Newburyport, but you can also apply for additional funds. I think that's the question here.
Do we know how much the allocation is?
I don't off the top of my head. I remember there being something in the area of like 60,000 the last time I was involved with it, but I don't know, Caitlin, do you know, or is that in the documentation? It's probably not in this.
I don't have that
particular
number open right now. No.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can check with Kevin Hurley and just confirm that for you. But the question here is whether you want to go beyond that.
Yeah, I hate to turn down potential money. I'm just not sure how we would use it right now.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if we had an affordable housing development initiative going
Right.
on, we might be able to help the developer access these funds.
I thought they were looking for units more than anything else. For preservation, something.
Well, they do mention rental assistance. That's one of the creation of units, expanding the supply, not listed in any order of preference. Expanding the supply, create permanent, affordable, assist people with disabilities, families, of course. Those are the priorities. So, yeah, it does sound like it's creation of units.
That would be great.
Let's get that Brown School going. Add a couple
Alright.
minutes.
Yeah, everybody's all for social justice these days. So let's
Right.
put your money where your mouth is, people.
Yeah, this is Andy again. Just with respect to the Brown School, I assume Caitlin's been updating you on this, but it seems pretty likely now, pretty certain that youth services is going to stay at the Brown School. That the feasibility study has not actually been presented yet. It's being finalized and will be presented in the coming weeks or months. But it seems, based on what I know right now, that it's more likely there'll be the expectation that youth services will stay there with the first floor. So, just to the extent that gives you any help in thinking about what might happen at the Brown School for affordable housing or even market rate housing, it sounds like we're really talking about, again, this is all with the presumption the city's going to retain the building, which requires a fair amount of investment, that it will actually be a smaller project. It's only going to be a 2-story project because it's only going to be the upper 2 floors. So, and I know that was a concern previously for folks interested in doing the project because you have to have a certain scale for it to make sense. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, I think, with the expectations put on the Brown School, but you might want to be aware of that if you're thinking about how to prioritize any funding or advocacy the trust is doing for the Brown School.
Good to know. Thank you.
Andy, was that for sure at this point?
It is not certain, but it certainly looks that way from all indications I'm getting, that it's not likely to pan out at the second location. The feasibility study that we had undertaken with an architectural firm has looked at both the Low Street site, that's the garage building, the old brick garage building next to the National Guard Armory. We're in the process of going ahead to purchase that piece of the property. There was hope that youth services might relocate there, but it would require bonding a project, and there's some debate, I think, about the cost of that project. And I think there's also at least some debate, at least in a few folks in this city, as to whether or not we retain the Brown School versus selling it or leasing it long term for in its entirety as a housing project of some type. So it seems, like I said, that it's not likely that youth services will move to Low Street, which means that it's very likely it will just stay to the default. And the question will then be, how much money is the city willing to invest to keep youth services there? And what kind of terms would be set up for housing if that's the case on the upper floors?
And what's the process now from, like, what's the timeline and all that? What happens next with that?
Well, the most recent thing that's going to happen is in the coming weeks, there'll be some sort of time frame to have a presentation made to the public. So that would probably post on the city calendar, and probably something in the newspaper. Basically, a public meeting where we'll present the findings of this feasibility study. So schematic plans for both sites, what might be possible cost estimates to go with that, summary of the pros and cons, and some of the needs of youth services, and some of the issues that the Brown School has. For instance, the other site is a very small structure, so it's not as much to deal with for upgrades or modifications, but there'll be a presentation of all that information, and then there'll be a report that has it in more detail. And the question at that point will be, what does the mayor and the city council, what do they want to do in terms of youth services, in terms of any bonding or funding that might be needed? The question will be back squarely before the elected officials. Because we've gone around on the Brown School a couple of times over the years, I'm a little hesitant to think that we'll have a perfect solution that comes out of this right away. But
You don't think?
yeah,
Wow.
but at least perhaps if we're nailing down at least where youth services goes, that's one piece of the puzzle. The concern I would have is that it reduces the size of the housing project that could be done above on 2 floors. And it also puts those 2 uses in closer proximity and potential, I don't want to say direct conflict, but the types of conflicts that might rise, making it a little awkward. So trying to cram those uses on the site, keeping some of the neighborhood playground space, it just seems like it's going to be harder to get someone to come in and do the type of upgrades that would be needed for even the utilities to service just 2 floors essentially. So it really comes down, and keep in mind, remember I think you all know this, but the council has already voted preemptively to limit the cap the number of units that could be built there. So, and I think that might have been done with the assumption that only the 2 upper floors are used and that youth services stays. But that's a factor there too, because right now the zoning doesn't allow the number of units that the YW, for instance, had originally proposed several years back.
Well, there are other ways to skin a cat.
If a public hearing, public presentation is scheduled, can you guys let us know? I
Yeah,
don't follow
Caitlin can just
these
update you on
events.
that. Yeah, when we end up scheduling that, Caitlin can just include that as an update to the trust. It'll probably be at least a month or so, but maybe month to 6 weeks from now, maybe around that time frame, I would think.
Right. Okay. Any other updates from the planning office?
I don't have any from me. Andy, do you have any more?
Nothing from me, no.
I'm sorry. I'm not up to speed on what's happened with the lottery, the marketing of the unit. That happened, the marketing activities.
For the Bushra Farms project?
Yeah.
No, not yet. That hasn't been scheduled yet. The marketing plan, that was all just submitted, I think was last week. So they need to get a sign off from DHCD, and then they'll schedule the lottery for that. And I'll let you know when that is. I plan on
Yeah,
attending.
please let us know.
Yep.
That would be interesting since it will be virtual. It's easy to try to attend.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so next meeting date? October? Uh, 15th or the 22nd?
I cannot do the 22nd. 15th I can.
I
What
can
do we
do
say? October 15th?
Good.
Yeah, that sounds good. Sound good to everybody?
Yeah.
All right. Excellent.
Do we have any minutes we need to approve?
Not today.
Okay.
Andy, I'm looking at, there's like one conflict on the calendar. City Council Planning and Development meeting. That may just be a placeholder.
Yeah, that's a placeholder. It's not clear yet whether that will be used, so it may not be a
Okay.
problem.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? Shall we adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone. Nice to see you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
See you. Take care.